What we'll do is continue, this just straight continue discussion from last time. And I think you had the question that we said we would end on. And I'm so bad at doing this that I said today I'm just going to go straight to the question first.
Right.
So re-ask your question and we'll start from there unless you guys have anything you want to start with.
We also have those that you sent.
Terrific. Yeah. So after your question, some of the questions that had been sent in that y'all had asked either remotely or we said we'd answer later in class. Thank you guys very much. But you first.
So I have two questions. It was just something that you guys said that I just wanted clarification on. So for universalism, it's universalism, I think when the question was asked of like why be Jewish? And I think your response was like, well, you can be Hindu or, other things. I guess like when we read in Numbers and Deuteronomy, when God commands like only worship me and obey me and follow me and not other gods, how does that get reconciled just with what you said? So that's the first question. And then second, when you said that you believe Jesus of Nazareth is in hell right now, under universalism and reincarnation, what is hell then? So those are my two questions.
Okay, so the first one, do you have an ESV Bible with you?
No, NIV.
I can put it up here.
So if you opened up to Micah 4, go ahead and do it. Do you have a Bible with you?
I'll put it up on
Open
screen
Micah 4.
too, if you want.
Michael 4, you said?
Micah.
Micah.
Here you go, Asher. You want NSV?
He said ESV.
ESV.
So can you go up just a little bit? Okay. So where it starts, for all peoples walk each in the name of its God, but we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. So apparently, if you go all the way to the top, this is at the end times, when we believe at least that the temple gets rebuilt, and right there it'll say, it won't use the English word temple, it'll say the house of the Lord or the house of God, and all the people are going to come to the nations, basically go to Jerusalem, and that's where the epicenter of God's knowledge is going to spread forth from. And if you notice, the gospel is not mentioned there, it's the law specifically. So the law is the thing that's going to be taught, and all these nations are going to be coming, and as you can see, various nations are going to be worshiping their own gods, but the Israelites are going to be worshiping specifically their God. And this is going to be some kind of, an okayness thing that's happening in the future times.
Okay.
So that would be the first one. So it seems to be okay with a plurality of religions happening at the same time, with, I guess, some kind of Judaic monotheism being the supreme one.
Okay.
So that's what it would, I could go pick up some commentaries over there and they would also say the same thing. Yep. And then the second part was about Jesus being in hell, or we say Gehenna.
Yeah.
So in Gehenna, at least my rabbis teach that there are, I don't know how you would want to say it, different compartments to Gehenna. And let's just say it's levels 1 through 10. 1 would be a place for everlasting torment, whatever that means. And the other compartments would be much more like Catholic purgatory, where a person would go in, they're going to be purified, and then they're going to come out, and then they're going to go to heaven. So if Jesus is in, say, for example, 2 through 10, then likely he'll come out and then go to heaven.
But how can anyone be in an everlasting if there's universal salvation? That's kind of the question.
That's correct. So that's why I used the word for whatever that means. I don't know what they mean by everlasting. So let me give you an example. If we're going to play language games, I'll do this. Does all mean all? If I worked all day long, does that mean that I worked all day long?
No, I understand that.
Right. So I don't know what everlasting here means. That's why I'm telling you that.
Okay.
Does he get it? I don't know.
Well, I mean,
You understand? I mean,
everlasting seems to only mean,
Well, I'll join.
Well, do you have
I'll join
eternal
his-
life?
yeah.
well, all's a different word. It all can mean a lot of different things.
Right, well, yeah.
Everlasting kind of means everlasting.
Do you, as being a Christian, do you now have eternal life?
I believe we do, yeah.
Okay, so eternal what does eternal mean? Does this mean from past all the way to? God is eternal, so now that you have
God's
eternal life, but your eternal life
From
started now, so this is
everlasting
kind of
to
weird, right?
everlasting, Like mine isn't from everlasting.
What do you say?
he said God is from everlasting to everlasting, but his isn't from everlasting.
But, so God is eternal and you're eternal?
Yeah,
Yes.
I have eternal life, but not in the same way that God does, because he
I see.
comes from everlasting, I don't.
I see, so see how we're playing with the word eternal now?
We're not
Right, no,
playing
so
with
that's
the
what I
word.
mean by the word
He's-
everlasting.
When he says playing with the word,
I don't know what it
He
means.
means that there are at least two definitions that we're using here, and these definitions are not identical.
You seem to be implying that the word everlasting has one and only one usage. So when you hear the word everlasting punishment, you have one assumption of what that means, when there could be other definitions or other meanings that could be applied to that. Just like the word all, just like the word eternal, just like almost every word that I'm aware of, both in Hebrew, English, and any other language I've learned. So it's complex.
So that's why I don't know how this plays in universalism. I'm not a master of universalism, I'm just telling you this is what my.
Yeah, it's
my
probably
rabbis
good
teach.
to point out that the mathematical concept of infinity does not go back to the time in which a lot of this stuff was written. So the idea, even the words that were used in Greek often refer to eons, meaning very long periods of time. My understanding of the Hebrew word, not being any kind of Hebrew scholar, is that the Hebrew word talks about extraordinarily long periods of time. But there's nothing out there that says explicitly that these are not finite periods of time. Eons are often intended to be understood to be everlasting in the modern language, but that wasn't necessarily the understanding that they were laid out at the time. In fact, if you wanted to say time without end, you would say what we might popularly say today of like ages and ages and ages, right? That can both mean a very long time, but it can also mean kind of nonstop. So I'm actually in his camp on use of the word eternal when it comes to hell, because as I've probably said in this class before, I don't know for sure. I'm open about it, but I tend towards a position that says the second death is second destruction of the soul. It's actual death of the spirit, and that when the biblical image that's cited in the New Testament is something like prophecy in the Old Testament that says, and the worm will never die and the fire will never be quenched, kind of thing. And that sounds like, oh, the worm will never die, the fire will never be quenched. That's the popular, what we might call medieval or early medieval idea of a lake of fire that's a place of eternal torment, kind of thing. But the original context that the prophet's using it in is this dead army. And the worm will never die and the fire will never be quenched, and to me is saying, in the idea of the world where there is, you're dead or you can be resurrected to life, which was the debate at the time that was happening in Judaism at least, and in the Greek world, that the fire does not die means the destruction of what is dead never ceases. The worm is never quenched, or the worm does never die, the fire is never quenched, means they ain't coming back. They're dead and dead permanently. So at least if that criticism bites on him, it also bites on my view, and so I'm a little motivated to defend it. At least the idea of yes, everlasting in the English means infinite in this Cantorian. These are infinities. This is what infinities are. But my own philosophical view is there's no such thing as an actual infinity. There are only potential infinities, and that every quantity that we talk about now is in fact finite. So even God, when we talk about God being past eternal, we don't mean that there's an eternal amount of time in the past. Typically the model that theologians use of God prior to creation, so to speak, is God in a static state. God's not sitting there being like, fish would be a good idea. Maybe I'll do some fish sometimes. Married bachelors, nope, can't do that, that's impossible. So he's not sequentially running through a number of thoughts. That God sits there with complete and total knowledge of all true propositions, a philosopher might say. But God's not sitting there being like, man, I spent a long time, when am I going to start this creation thing, right? That you have this God in an atemporal state, and then he either steps into time as he creates time, or alternately, in my understanding of it, the Father remains in that state, and it's the Son and the Spirit that step into time. And in fact, it's necessarily the case, I think, that has to happen. I could absolutely be wrong about that, but it seems to me reasonable to say that. And then that's the reason I'm a Trinitarian. But ultimately, even we wouldn't say God's eons go back forever. There's a state that's the origin state of all of that you see here that seems, at least in Orthodox Christian theology, small o Orthodox Christian theology, to be God in a static, unchanging state, not in a time's ticking by and he's walking in circles or something like that. I say that pejoratively, but you get the point that there's no change in God's mental state that's going on there. He's not thinking through things. Whatever thinking he does is thinking that is complete and total. So if that's the case, there isn't even a past eternal thing. Now, to your point, I don't know that I would disagree a little bit in that under the term everlasting, it's possible to be both past eternal and to be future eternal. And so he can consistently use the word by saying, by eternal, that can be valent in two directions. It can be eternal this way, it can be eternal that way. God's eternal bidirectionally, human beings are eternal unidirectionally. And I think you guys believe that too, right? That there's no end in this direction to the human being. So I think we're on the same page there. Your second question, did he answer your second question?
Yeah, that
okay.
was, yeah.
All right, do you then, if you're satisfied, then yes, sir.
Do you want to read these out?
Sure. So these were two questions that Scott sent Asher. If you could sum up the message God was showing us.
And Effie, if you were the author of these questions and either I didn't transmit the question properly or they're not answering the question you asked, please jump in and re-ask your question.
So if you could sum up the message God was showing us, or the Jewish people in the entire Hebrew Bible, what would you say it was?
So, I'd say it's 4 points. Will you bring up the passage in Kohelet?
Yeah.
So, and this is not in necessary order, but it would be love your neighbor as yourself. It would be contrite, repentant prayer. It would be that there's going to be a very powerful human that's going to be coming, and he's going to pull us out of this cycle that we're in. And then the last one, go ahead and read the section.
The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man.
There you go. That's what I would say. That is it. It would be those 4 points.
Which, when I say things like we're not that far off from each other, right? That's tell me how that could not be said in any church, and is not frequently said in any church. The only disagreement again is who's Messiah. Not the only disagreement, but you see.
Is there something in there about loving God as well, or is that supposed to be encapsulated in number 4, or would you say that's not in there?
Is there something in there about loving God, or is that encapsulated in?
It would be
fear God?
encapsulated in there. Like, fear God, obey his commandments, for this is the whole purpose of mankind.
So is this also for us today, or was that only for the Israelites?
From the beginning till present.
So then I guess I'm still kind of confused about my question, my first question, and then number 4 then, because like when I see that, I interpret it as just fearing like the God of Israel. So I guess I'm still just not like, then in Micah I see, that where you pointed out, but I don't know, maybe this is just a statement that I'm still feeling a little bit of a disconnect of that.
I may misunderstand your position, but tell me if I've got this wrong. The position on reincarnation here is not everybody makes it at the end under worshiping their own God. What happens is if you worship kind of quote unquote the wrong God, when you die, you come back in another form, then maybe you're a little closer to God or maybe a little further, but ultimately you track so that your final instantiation when you are reborn again is one where you are worshiping the one true God, and it's after that one that you go. So to speak, it was whoever it was that asked, I keep saying it was one of the Gandhis, I'm not sure who it was, but some Hindu holy man that said like, oh, so you're okay with us believing in Jesus? And he was like, yes. He was like, yeah, that's fine, that's true. And he said, they said, oh, okay, well, we're gonna be reincarnated too. And he's like, yeah. And then they said, well, if I believe in Jesus, is this my last life? And basically the guy was like, no, you'll have another one. And the idea was, believing in Jesus will get you part of the way to what the Hindu knows to be true, but that's not it. And so you're going to have to keep coming. So in the same way, is it true in the same way, eventually, before you make that last step, you have to have acknowledged the God of Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me.
So ultimately, to take all these timelines and run them through and let this be the timeline, kind of physically speaking, where your belief is from God. Any of the ones out here are going to end up being longer, whereas if you hit this timeline, you go straight to heaven quicker.
That's not how I understood you interpreted Micah 4, though, because Micah 4 starts in the last days and talks about what I assume you're interpreting as the last time, the end. And all the nations will walk in the name of God, of their gods. We will walk in the name of our God at the end time. So that would seem to.
Let me ask this question: do you think that the nations here that worship other gods other than the one,
Yes.
that's their last lifetime, or do they have more lifetimes to go?
Or do they have what?
More lifetimes to go in order to eventually come under the.
I don't know. It just seems that the text says that in the last days when the house of the Lord gets built and a plurality of nations start to gather there, there's going to be Christians, Buddhists, Hindus. I'm just throwing things in there into the text.
Yeah,
but the Israelites are going to be the Israelite God worshippers, and everybody else is going to have some kind of whatever system that they're doing. That at least even in academic scholarship, they even agree with that interpretation. So
Yeah, but isn't it the case?
Isn't my personal one.
It's the case that it's one of the two has to be true. It's either the case that it's okay that one can go straight to heaven by worshiping someone other than the one, or it's the case that that'll start to track you in the right direction, but eventually you have to have been born and live in a life where the end of that life is that you do these four things. So if it's the case that at the end times there are no more lives to be lived, then it's false that you're working your way through and tracking by reincarnation.
Yeah, so I don't know the timeline of the end times.
Got it.
This is all speculation, so I don't know.
I think you're right. In order to be logically consistent, there have to be multiple lifetimes available to somebody. But I mean, if the end times last 1,000 years, and it takes you 10 lifetimes over those 1,000 years, then maybe you track maybe that's the beginning of 1,000 years. I don't agree with his interpretation, but I'm trying to at least make it logically consistent.
Feels like you're starting to make his interpretation.
Yeah, I'm trying to say how it could possibly be logically consistent.
Just to clarify, does the lifetimes that a soul go through, are they sequential in our timeline? Or if when I die, could I reincarnate as someone in the 1st century or?
When you die and reincarnate?
Yeah. Is it sequential, or could you go back in a previous time? And
I don't know of anything going back in a previous time.
Okay.
I only
So
know that it's going
like
from
when
this
you
time
die,
and going
If
forward.
I die in 2050 or 2025 plus,
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure you have that word plus.
Yeah.
How does someone go back to the 1st century?
When you're in your lifetime, do you know if you made it or not?
Can I what?
When you're in this particular lifetime, do you know whether you've made it or not?
Do you know whether you've made it or not? Not that I know of.
So you just play your game and die and see what happens, and you either make it or you don't, you go back and try again?
Sure, almost as much as you do. I mean, almost as much as you do, right? Do you not do that right now?
He may be getting to the point of what assurance do you have that what you're doing will fulfill the promise God gave?
Will I ever know that I have made it?
Christians are very fond of saying, I have assurance of my salvation. I don't have to worry about it. Do you have a commensurate level of assurance? If not, what assurance do you have?
Yeah, do you have any knowledge in your lifetime that you will be reconciled to God?
Well, I personally do not, no.
Well,
Do you?
Yes,
You do?
yes.
So let me ask you a quick question. Are you responsible for the commandments or anything like that?
Are you responsible to follow them?
What do you mean by responsible?
Do you have to follow
Are you
the commandments?
personally responsible for keeping any of God's laws?
To some degree, yes.
He said yes or no.
He said to some degree.
To some degree.
What do you mean by to some
I see.
degree?
Well, not being a theologian, I believe that I have been justified and will be reconciled with God. And from that point on, then I should try my best to keep the commandments.
He's got to try.
Well, let me.
Oh, so you got to work. Okay.
Well,
Good.
let me-
So same with my system too. You got to try. You got to work for this.
I have to work, yes, yeah, I have to do things.
I hear you, man.
I have to do things to try to keep those commandments. However,
Oh,
if I don't,
here we go.
Well, hold
I
on.
don't,
This may be the difference.
I'll still make it.
So the Orthodox Protestant Christian view would be, yes, he's responsible to try. And in fact, the difference between whether his faith is real and whether it's not is, does he try? If he tries, then and that is to say his faith is alive, then that is a saving faith. And what do we mean by saving faith? It's not his works that are the basis of his faith. His faith is in that the one promised that if you believe in his Messiah and his Messiah's work of making sin dead, that Messiah, that the one will take Messiah's work to cover and atone for your sin, past, present, and future. So if it was the case that and this is where the different strains of Protestantism will get tangled up, but if it's the case that you endure to the end, that is to say you continue to believe that that's true, that God has covered your sins, then even if you're trying wasn't that good, the part where you failed is God already promised to cover in the same kind of covenant he makes with Abraham of like, this isn't up to you, I'm going to do this anyway. So that would be the Orthodox Christian response, and then thus the basis for an assurance of salvation is that it's not my own effort that matters, it's Christ's work that matters, and the only part that's contingent on me is believing in it. And then maybe this is where we're shifting the goalposts a little bit, believing in it enough that our faith counts as living and not dead.
So if Jesus took the punishment for his sins, he's not responsible for them anymore, correct? Jesus took on all that responsibility.
Yes, that would be
Right.
that's the viewpoint.
And you agree with that, right?
Yeah, but I have to obey. I trust that that is true, but I still have to obey.
But what do you mean by have
have
to?
to.
So if have to means if you don't obey, then you're no longer covered, then you don't have to obey.
How about ought to?
Yes, but everybody ought to.
Okay.
So your works, here's the thing, your works they come from your faith, right? It's not like, I get the argument, right? If it's works based, like I get it, right? But like, if you truly have faith and you walk the walk instead of just talking the talk, then the two are pretty much in alignment. And when they come out of alignment, like Scott was saying, that's where God's got you covered, because God knows you're gonna fail sometimes, right? And no matter how hard we try, is it possible to keep all the, I don't know, the commandments, but the 600 different rules, right? Like, maybe that's not the right number.
It's 613, but a lot of them had to do with the temple, so more
Right.
like 100 and something.
Okay, so 100 and some, right? It's like, I would posit it's possible for somebody to keep all those, but not realistic. And I would challenge you to give me, other than...
Careful, because he'll get you on this one, I'll tell you.
So, yeah, okay, so who kept them all? What human other than Jesus, who kept them all?
I wouldn't ask that question. I'd go
Oh, Luke 1:6. You can open it up.
Zechariah
There's
and
two people, a
Elizabeth
male and a female.
Okay.
John the Baptist's parents.
lived in accordance with the law, lived blameless according to the law, righteous.
Perfect, so it can be done.
Yes.
Awesome. It can be done.
Yeah, yeah.
Good. Point proven. It can be done, right? I would say that.
Yeah, it looks to me like...
Yeah, 99.999% of humanity is gonna come up short, right? Like I come up short every day, pretty much every hour.
Myself too.
Yeah, so God covers the gap.
Bill's not happy back there.
Whoa.
What's
Yeah.
up?
No, righteousness and keeping the law are two separate issues.
Are they?
I think so.
What's the definition of
All
righteous?
right, Abraham, it was counted, because of his faith, it was counted as righteousness.
Yeah.
But he
But
did
there was
not
no
keep
law.
the law.
The law wasn't around in his
He
time.
kept breaking God's, he kept falling out of favor or doing, no, he didn't, I'm sorry, that's the wrong word.
Yeah.
He kept doing things that weren't right, I guess. But yet, when God made his covenant, it was an unconditional covenant. Okay? So Abraham goes on and he keeps doing these things that he shouldn't do. Pimps his wife out, he does all kinds of bad things, okay? But yet, God's still stuck with him.
I don't think he pimped his wife out, but yeah, go ahead. I know what you mean.
He does bad things.
Yeah.
God's still stuck with him to the end. That's my point.
Yeah.
Unconditional covenant. And that same story is repeated over and over and over, and that's somewhat the story, the basis of Christianity. God says, if you believe in my Son, it's an unconditional deal that you are justified.
I got it.
And from then on, your salvation, you start working towards salvation.
Go ahead. You good?
So did he believe that Abraham continued to fall?
Yeah, I think, so, you know, Hebrews turns around and cites, the letter, Epistle of Hebrews cites Abraham as a hero of faith and specifically points to Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. And then he turns around and says, okay, well, Abraham's righteous, but he also sinned in the following things. He should have told Pharaoh that this was his wife and not his sister. He should have done, you know, these following things. So he's saying he's declared righteous, but then he messes stuff up. But God's declaration of him being righteous is in some way applies to all of that.
He also doubted God. You know, he laughed when God said, hey, you're going to have...
That was Sarah. Sarah laughed.
Sarah laughed, and so he did made a lot of mistakes along the way.
Yeah, I don't know that Abraham never stopped believing God's promise that we have recorded.
But God's covenant was unconditional to Abraham.
Yes, that's true.
Okay? And that same unconditional covenant is Christ's covenant to us.
But
or is God's covenant to us through Christ. It says, if you believe.
But Bill, unless I misread it, God's covenant to Abraham was not that Abraham will be declared righteous. God's covenant to Abraham was, I will make of you a great nation. Right. It is logically consistent with God's promise to make of Abraham a great nation and send Abraham to hell.
And he was declared as righteous.
He was declared as righteous because he believed God's promise.
Faith, yes.
Yeah. So the righteousness that's cited is, God said, I'm going to make of you a great nation, and Abraham was like, Roger that, I don't doubt it. And he never did doubt it from what we can tell. So that doesn't equal that Abraham is saved. So God's promise was not, I will save you, Abraham. God's promise was, I'll make of you a great nation.
But it's the pattern of the story.
Yeah, there's a pattern to it that cannot be
is repeated.
Denied, yes.
And that's the pattern of the Christian salvation.
But the specific problem that we're talking about here is personal accountability to God and God's judgment on that person, whether that person will enter eternal life or enter some other, in this case, set of iterations that eventually leads to eternal life, or, in my understanding, eternal death.
Yeah, and then back to my initial question is, do you know that you're going to make it? And what's the criteria for making it? You have to get 100%, 51%? 1%, you know, how do you know? What do you have to do?
So I won't answer the question, I'll put it out so that we can think about it. To the Jew, this is fairly easy. Here are X amount of laws, here are all the laws, here are the amount of laws that I'm responsible to follow because I'm not a Levite, I'm not a, whatever else. So of these laws, if I follow these laws, then I'm good. If I fail to follow these laws, then I offer sacrifice, ask forgiveness, and the Almighty has said He'll forgive me. If I follow these laws and I fail and I don't repent, now I may be in trouble. Okay, so there's a cartoon version of theirs. Here's the Christian one though. So that one is very simple. Did I follow the law? When I didn't follow the law, did I repent? If the Christian version is, if I follow the law, it doesn't matter, so to speak. Christ paid for any time that I don't follow the law. And so if He paid for any time that I don't follow the law, the only difference is, as James says, is your faith alive or is it dead? Well, how do I know if my faith is alive or is dead? So they can be as confident as they are that they followed the law and that God would agree with them. But you never want to say exactly how God views it. The Christian's going to say, I'm as confident in my salvation as I am that my faith is alive. But what's the standard for your faith is alive? How strong does your belief have to be? Does it have to be 0? Does it have to be anything greater than 0? Does it have to be enough to move mountains? How much faith do you need to have a saving faith? As James says, can that faith save you? And his it seems to be a rhetorical question being like, it cannot, for it is dead. So what's the difference between a dead faith and a live faith, and how do you know as a Christian? I'll answer that question later, but I put it to you to basically say this. In these two competing systems, one of them says the standard is the law, the other one says the standard is belief in God. Paul, I'll leave it there. Both systems have room for uncertainty. So if there's room for uncertainty, this uncertainty is my faith alive or dead? This uncertainty is, did I follow the law properly? So both of them have room for uncertainty. It's the Christian's burden, if he's going to say, I have full assurance of salvation, 100%, to say why they know that that faith is alive, 100% as well. Yes, sir, you had a hand up.
It'll probably get off track.
This is solid ground. There is no track. Yeah, go ahead. And then we'll come back to Bill.
I guess going kind of piggybacking off the Abraham situation where he didn't have the law, and then they're given the law, and then tying what you're saying where you guys kind of have a clear-cut path to salvation where you have these written laws. You had talked about common law versus statutory law and how that was done back then, and how the law came about. It seems as though now, like for you guys, you look at the law as statutory, like it's written down now, whereas the Jew back then, it was more of a common law, like things were developing as society was going on. So not everybody knew or aware of these written laws, right? And some weren't able to read, so I guess I'm struggling with the idea that you just look at these sets of laws, and as long as you follow each one of those, that's your path to salvation. Whereas in the situation with Abraham, it seemed more like the purpose of the law overall was just to listen to God and obey God.
Now, what do you mean by that? Because what law was Abraham following?
What law?
Yeah, so Moses is after Abraham, so it's not Torah law, but what law do you say?
Abraham was called, and he listened and obeyed that voice.
Okay, so he had a command. His law, so to speak, was leave your where your parents are, and go to this land I'll show you. Okay, right, got it. All right, sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No. So I guess, like I said, I guess I struggle with the idea that, like you said, you have these sets of laws, and now they've kind of been dwindled down, like you said, because you're not in the promised land. And so, it kind of, you have a smaller set of laws you have to cover, and you kind of go back to those and you say, have I done all these correctly? When I don't know if the purpose of the law, and I guess this is what I'm struggling with as I read the Old Testament, if the purpose of the law was really just, I got to do this one, I got to do this one, I got to do this one. Rather, those things were sort of precedent for cases and examples of situations that were going on in society at the time, where they were saying, hey, this is happening, don't do this, and rather the whole idea of the purpose of the law was to be listening. And this is where the idea of faith comes in, right? Like, you're supposed to be listening and obeying God in that way. And there's so many different circumstances. The law is not all comprehensive. You would think God would have wrote down everything in there. Obviously there are some laws that kind of sum everything up, like love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself, and everything can come out of that. But all these smaller laws seem to be subsets of issues that were happening in a society at a certain time. So I don't know, that's not really a question. I've just been wrestling with that a little bit ever since I've learned of the whole common law and statutory law thing.
So I mean, we have a body of literature outside of the Hebrew Bible itself. So like the Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch, and stuff like this, that are basically our legal system. And so you can, pretty much almost all of our laws are based in the Torah, where you could go and see the law itself and then its amplification over time.
Because the one thing that I would say that maybe you may not have understood Asher's position, we would say that the technical term is halakha, that Jewish law is a common law system till today. So in other words, when new situations arise, etc., that you can apply the law and its legal principles to a new situation today that did not exist in those days. Okay. So cars, lights, computers, medical ethics, a lot of this stuff the types of things that we face today did not exist then, but you can apply the principles and it will develop, and new law or new applications of those laws come about. So it is still a common law system in general.
Okay.
Which the Christian does too, right? Abortion is not specifically addressed in the Bible. The Christian looks to the Bible to extract the principles of what is God's value of life, where does life potentially begin, how are we supposed to treat it, etc. And so we say, based on these following precepts that we would draw from Scripture, this is what we think about abortion. Either it starts here, or it's legitimate, or it's illegitimate. But you make that case not by pointing at some New Testament passage or Old Testament passage that says this is what to do in the case of abortion. Or, yeah, and sometimes it gets so complicated, you may have reached it and be like, you know what, I'm tired of interpreting it, this is too much. Horses and buggies only. Nobody gets any diesel generators unless it's a special exception, and then we live in Pennsylvania. So continues to be modern interpretation of ancient traditions, even in Christianity.
Okay, so I understand that correctly. Now it's not necessarily looking back at those laws, it's looking at the ones that have kind of developed over time as a result of what's going on in society now, basically, rather than looking back at the 613. Right?
No, you would still, I mean, here, let me ask you as a U.S. citizen, do we look back to the Constitution that was over 200 years ago? I would say yes, we actually do, even though we have laws that address certain things today. So it's still, you don't then not look at the Constitution. Same thing here, you would not just, I don't need to look at the Torah laws anymore because I have this. It's all intertwined.
Okay.
So that question sounds kind of, it sounds incongruous to me.
I have a question. You know how you said that we come back like reincarnation? So do we get the same, do you guys believe that we get the same soul when we come back and it's just in a different body? The only reason I ask that is because if we're eventually going to go to heaven anyway, through like trying to get it right over and over, do we at least get a chance to know like what we did wrong in our first lives, and when we come back as reincarnated, do we get the same soul so we remember, so we can try again to be more obedient and do those, follow those laws, so that maybe we don't have to come back 2, 3, 4 times before we actually get to heaven? Is that weird? Is that a weird question? I don't know.
I mean, are you asking, is that the way it works?
Yeah.
In our system?
Yeah. Do you get the same soul?
That's pretty close.
So you can keep trying, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So that, do you have like a reference of maybe how you might have made some mistakes before, so that in your new soul, with your new life, same soul, that you've gotten that much closer so that you could try a little harder? It's like getting a lot of chances to try to correct it if you have the same soul, or no?
So when it comes in Rabbinic Judaism to the soul, it seems that sometimes your whole soul will go into its next incarnation. Sometimes they believe that it will split apart and your soul will go into like a diverse bodies.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would work like that.
So maybe I'll ask, with her permission, I'll ask a specific variant of her question. Does your future soul carry any memories?
No.
Then how do you learn from one life to the other? How does the process of reincarnation help you go from being wrong to finally getting to the point where you believe in the one?
Because your memory is blotted out and you're given a completely new slate.
Right. So is it a gradual process of getting up towards God?
Yes.
How does that gradual process occur if you can't carry the lessons from the previous process?
That was my question.
I think the easy one to do would be like this. So we believe that Cain and Abel are reincarnated as Moses and Aaron.
Okay.
And so if you read the Cain and Abel story, you'll go, oh, so which one was the oppressor, and so on and so on. In Rabbinic Judaism, we believe that those roles are switched with Moses and Aaron. And so I don't know how to explain it other than when they were given a new clean slate, this is now how they were to behave, even without remembering their past.
Okay, so then let's say, here they are, they're really the same guys.
Yes.
Cain and Abel, Moses and Aaron. What's the point to reincarnation? That is to say, let's say that Cain and Abel were...
To repair what you did wrong.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But it seems like there's
But how did-
continuance of person.
Yeah, why is it that, so let's say that in one model, the reincarnation model, Cain does something wrong, and he's reincarnated, if I understood you right, to be Aaron. So is Cain Aaron?
It's
Is Cain Aaron in the Aaron Moses thing?
yes.
Yeah, okay, so Cain is reincarnated as Aaron, but he remembers none of this.
Right.
But he gets it right, so to speak, or
That's
mostly,
correct.
eventually gets it right, right? Yeah, he gets it right in the end. Okay, so why does this matter at all? Like, let's do another model where it's just Moses and Aaron gets it right.
So,
What was, or maybe a
how
better,
should
I didn't ask that
describe
question better. What was it that mattered about Aaron having been Cain?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't recall.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be,
But-
if there's a good answer in Rabbinic Judaism to that question, that would go a long way in helping answer both her question and a question that I have, which is, I have always had a problem with the Buddhist reincarnation model, because in some strains of Buddhism, you drink a potion between the two, and now you don't remember anything before, and you're like, well, what was the point? So what's the point of having the reincarnation cannot be an iterative, growing process if you don't carry something about the previous process in there. If you don't have either memory that you're like, ooh, I've done that before and I shouldn't do that, or there's some moral sense that grows, that once you've done evil, that somehow there's a pull back to the good. There can be maybe many models for this, but what that model is would help us understand the purpose of reincarnation. Because as you articulate it right now, I don't see the purpose of reincarnation. I hear the fact of reincarnation stated, but I don't understand why it's relevant to the process. That is to say, the Almighty could have just said, well, I will create two souls fresh, put them in Moses and Aaron, and I get the same results out of it. Why did I have to put them through Cain and Abel?
So I actually don't understand why you need to have a memory of the past in order for this to be effective.
Because if we say here's Cain and Abel down at this layer, and then Abel did this and he was good, Cain was down here, okay, so this is bad, and anything upwards is towards good, and that ultimately here's some standard of good that you got to hit, okay? So in this thing, Abel does this and he's above the standard of good, he's hit the mark. But if there's no memory to be carried through here, then when Moses and Aaron are here at the level of good, why did it matter that these two are connected?
So Scott, can I ask you?
That graphically speaking, that's what I'm saying. Maybe there's a better way to put it.
So the same issue comes up with the B theory of time, in which if you are eternal in this little sausage, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Right.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
And if they're just slices, there's no continuance of personhood from moment to moment. So who's to say that it's the same soul? If there's no memory of the past, it's just another soul. I mean, what else would it be? What makes it, if Scott becomes...
I think that's a harder way. I think that's a very thorough way to understand it, but I think that's a harder way.
Describe it, but
Let me try one more time then, because this isn't helpful either. Okay.
All right, so then let me ask both of you this question then. So I'm going to read from Jeremiah 31:34.
Okay.
You can explain it to me. So, and they shall teach no more every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, says the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity and will remember their sin no more. God's not going to remember
You say
their
Jeremiah
sin
31?
anymore.
What was the reference?
31:34, right?
31, 34, okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you need
So
to...
since you're talking about memory, you both are talking about memory.
Yeah.
Is remember part of memory?
Yes.
Well, hold on. I mean,
Oh, so
let's-
now we're gonna go
come
to
on.
this. Right,
We're not
exactly.
playing the parlor tricks, right? This is not a zinger thing. I'm just curious, and so I'm asking...
And I'm just curious about that.
So let me explain. I think let's read it in context, and I think what you would see is that God is saying, just like I would of my child. My child does something really stupid, like they would ever do that, right? Daily. And I say, okay, I'm not going to remember that. That's a choice for him not to apply that, to hold a grudge, to... Does it mean that God doesn't remember. I don't think any of us believe that God does not remember things.
Asher,
right?
are you saying that this verse is literal and it means that God forgets stuff?
I don't think anyone would
What
say
did he
that.
say?
He said, do you believe that this passage is literal and God actually forgets things?
So I'll tell you actually what I believe about the Hebrew Bible, that much of this is not literal.
Right. What about this one?
So, I mean, I'm just, since you're talking about memory,
Yeah.
what would you do? Is remember memory?
Yeah, I think I remember your sins no more is...
So God's not going to remember their sins anymore, so what's the point?
It's a way of saying, I will intentionally act like they never happened. Yeah. Now, how is that helpful in the discussion of reincarnation?
So, because I don't understand why memory for you is so important. It's not important for me
I probably
that
have
God reincarnates somebody and you have no memory of
I've
something.
done a bad job explaining it.
So I guess the answer to your question would be...
If you're going to go from one state, here I am not being very good, so I get reincarnated, and the next time I do a little bit better, and the next time I do a little bit better, and the next time I do a little bit better. Is the fact that I did a little bit better this time dependent on the previous life in any way? Is the fact that I did better here
It seems
dependent
to be
on-
that way.
Now, how
I
can it
don't know
possibly be
how.
that way if there's a baked-in assumption here, is that you have to, that you're learning, that this is a learning process, that you're learning morally over time.
No, I don't believe it's a
Okay,
learning
I think that's the
process.
assumption that we're working off of?
Yes.
So
It's your soul being corrected again and again. It's not a learning process.
So if your soul, but correction typically to the Western mind is a way to cause learning. You know, the dog who gets zapped every time he goes to the invisible fence learns because he's corrected. That the purpose of correction is to cause them to learn not to do something.
Okay,
Are you saying the purpose of this correction is not causing learning?
Yeah, it does not seem to be that this is a learning process.
Okay. Then what is the process? If
It
it's
seems
not a
to be,
learning process.
some kind of a process that your soul goes through purification.
If you could ask that question specifically of your rabbis, we would be interested in that particular response. Brian, until either switch hands, man, or we'll get to you now. That was like a workout. That was like 15 minutes straight.
I kind of have a follow-up on this in the second question as well, because it does sound like you're saying there's some sort of ratcheting system. There's not a lot of falling back in here. There is going forward. I've heard you say that it doesn't seem to be memory. And I've also heard you say you don't know what it is, and I can accept that, but can you theorize in some way what it is? You've said things that sound almost karmic in nature. You've done something wrong, so in the future you have to do something to purify against that.
It sounds like karmic in nature.
Yeah, it sounds karmic in nature,
So,
yes.
so the
I would agree with that.
the ratcheting is
Yeah,
closer
tikkun,
to
yes.
a karmic resolution, kind of like almost, you mentioned Gehenna and purgatory. It's a cleansing for previous wrongs.
So in purgatory, it seems that this is a place where you actually will remember everything, and you're going to, like,
interesting.
right whatever wrong in there. The reincarnations is not like in purgatory.
Well, I understand, but it sounds like this is a way to potentially do some portion of that while alive.
Can you do what? Well,
That by being reincarnated, it is like doing a portion of what goes on in purgatory.
yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
My other question was, I'm sorry if you've mentioned this before. Can you explain what you feel like your relationship to God is? I asked about love, and you referenced fear, reverence, maybe.
Okay.
And when the phrase having a personal relationship comes up, you push back on that, which I tend to agree with. So I'd like to hear what your relationship with God.
My relationship with God? I have no relationship with God.
None whatsoever.
None.
What do you mean by that specifically?
I have a relationship with Him. I have a relationship with you. I don't have any communication with God.
He doesn't hear your prayer?
Maybe He does. I don't know.
Does the Bible indicate He hears your prayer?
Well, if you believe that God can choose, God could choose not to hear my prayer.
He could choose not to respond to it, but is it possible that if someone could have the temerity to ask God and He wanted to answer, hey, Asher prayed for something, God would be like, yeah, I don't know, I wasn't listening. Do you think that that's how it works? Or do you think by not hearing your prayer, He means I heard you, but I'm not going to respond to it.
That's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have no personal relationship with God that I claim.
So personal relationship to you is bidirectional communication.
Or it could go this way and then back down this way, that's totally fine too, but,
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's bidirectional.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Well, either this way, not this way.
Yeah,
there you go.
touche. Yeah, you got me on that one. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Asher, would it potentially be more accurate to say that you are a follower of God and not somebody who has a relationship?
Is it what?
Would it be better to say that you're a follower of God, not that you have a relationship with God? Would that be a better way to describe it?
Yeah, probably, yeah. Like, I try to, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If someone were to be born into like a belief of like Buddhism or like even Muslim, would God prefer you to stick with that religion or belief and instead of like following his path?
Is that a question for him or for me?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. You want to go first?
What do you say?
If somebody was born, say, a Hindu or a Muslim, or Buddhism,
Yeah.
is it better for them to stay where they are or like convert?
Follow God's path.
Follow God's path, whatever that may be.
Or if I can, let me, I think this is the question he's asking, but if not, it's a similar one. If you're a Buddhist and you encounter Judaism, is it better for you to remain a Buddhist or is it better to convert to Judaism?
So my rabbis would likely teach that it is better that they follow like the God-fearer laws than be a Buddhist.
Right, okay. So by that he means we, the Gentiles, are under 7 laws that are kind of Noahic in timing, it seems, in the Bible. So instead of having 613/100 and whatever that you can follow today, we've only got 7. So better to follow God, so in short, better to follow the Almighty than to stay in Buddhism.
So would it be better to like follow God's commandments instead of like, believing that if you're a Buddhist or Muslim, then you'd be sent like Gehenna or something like that?
Yes.
And then what?
Would it be better then to follow God's commandments, the 7 laws, or remain a Buddhist or Muslim and then go to Gehenna?
So if you came across the 7 laws, it would be better for you to follow that, but my rabbis would likely tell you to be the best Buddhist that you can be the best Hindu that you can be the best Muslim that you can be. That's what they would likely tell you.
Because they believe in reincarnation.
Yeah.
Say it again?
Because they believe in reincarnation and they're like, yeah, if God puts you on this
and
path,
so on.
okay. I would say it's better to go on God's path as quickly as possible. Because I think it's appointed unto man once to die, and after that comes the judgment. Okay, with your permission, now that we've only got 13
Then there was a
minutes
second
left.
question that they had.
Oh,
here,
sorry,
too.
yeah,
I
I'm
don't- I
sorry,
don't know,
please.
but
We got
wanna do
one
the
done.
second one?
There's one question. We're basically becoming, we're doing a pretty good job of doing rabbinic Judaism at this point, right?
there you go.
Okay, all right.
You indicated that this question would be better put in writing, so I'm asking again. I have reviewed and have not found any. The earliest reference I can find is from a Kabbalistic rabbi from the 1200 CE, more than 700 years after the Talmud. The Talmud reports on oral tradition dating back to and before the time of Yeshua. The Kabbalah does not, so concepts new to the Kabbalah were not around at the time of Yeshua, and thus cannot explain the rejection of Yeshua at the time he was rejected on religious grounds. In any event, do the rabbis contend that reincarnation was an Orthodox Jewish teaching at the time of Yeshua? If so, how do they distinguish Daniel 12:2?
So I'll answer the question this way. So in Orthodox Rabbinic Judaism, they believe that Kabbalah goes back to the time of Adam. So it predates Jesus, it predates Abraham, and so on. So now, if you want to use academic scholarship and say that Kabbalah is something late, please tell me, because then I would be more than happy to use academic scholarship against Christianity in the New Testament. And that's all I would do in response. So say, for example, if somebody said, hey, academic scholarship says that Kabbalah as a practice is a medieval type of a concept, or maybe we can go a little bit previous to the medieval times. So we see like text like called the Zohar and stuff like this, I would go, all right, great. So if we're going to use academic scholarship, please, let's be fair. And I'm going to use academic scholarship and point out that Paul's 13 or 14 letters, that 6 of them are forgeries. Paul is not the author of those texts. Not only that, what you call to be divinely inspired text, even the other letters that academic scholarship says that are Paul's letters, that there's interpolations in them, where basically there's Greek that is foreign to the text and theology that is foreign to the rest of the text itself too. So I would just use academic scholarship to fight your academic scholarship. That's the only thing that I would do.
To the specific question of how would you interpret this verse in light of, maybe in light of reincarnation?
Daniel 12:2.
Daniel 12:2. It doesn't look like it hurts reincarnation in any way.
Well, let's say that I wanted to lean towards the literal side on Daniel 12:2, and it says, "And many of those who sleep on the earth in the dust shall awake, these to life everlasting, and these to shame, contempt everlasting." Where if everlasting doesn't mean everlasting, if it at least means, if it seems like it's saying there are 2 states here.
Yes.
Some to life eternal, some to death eternal. Eternal death, maybe you could say.
See, that's where they just misread. So he just said eternal death.
Okay, let's say eternal contempt.
Yeah, it's an eternal abhorrence, right?
Yes.
So in other words, we have one that is, hey, these people are going to be elevated, like, wow, these are awesome people, and the other one is, nah, we abhor these people. This is not a good situation.
So if
right, but it's not death, though.
Right. No. Okay.
Right.
Absolutely right. According to this verse, you're right. Are you saying that in eternity, in the final state in which some people live?
Yeah, so what's really interesting about this passage is everything that I've seen from it, as this unfolds in the end times, because apparently this is an end time scenario, there seems to be disagreement as to how these things start to unfold.
Yeah.
In other words, I'll give you one. Here in the Daniel 12 passage, where it talks about those being raised, they would say that those people who obey the Torah are raised first, then some other people are going to be raised after that, and I don't know how you want to say it, like in a bottom to top order. So the patriarchs will be raised at the very last so that they can see their progeny and all of the stuff that kind of happens.
Yes.
So, but this is all speculation as to how this works. So on all these passages, all I've been able to find is just speculation.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me then ask a question of my own. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Do you know if any of the Jewish sects at the time, the 1st century CE, the Essenes, the Pharisees, or the Sadducees believed in the reincarnation that you described today?
Do you know of any sect at the time of Jesus in the 1st century that believed in reincarnation?
Of Jews.
Well, I mean, my rabbis would say yes, the Pharisees.
And in fact, generally, when Asher talks about this, one of the best examples, or at least possibilities, is actually in the Christian New Testament, in John, where a kid is born blind. And the students of Jesus appear to say, well, who sinned? The parents or this child? Now, it seems to be one of the reasonable ways of understanding that is they understood that this kid, prior to his birth, sinned. So when did he sin? I only know of 2 options of when he could have sinned, maybe 3. One of those, though, could be reincarnation. You also find passages in the New Testament where, are you Elijah? Are you Jeremiah? Are you that prophet? That would, without any, Christian prejudice to what is often called New Age ideas or Eastern ideas, it would be reasonable, I think, to understand those as possible instances of people at the time in the 1st century who believed in reincarnation in some degree.
Right. Well, I mean, Elijah was ascended and didn't die, entered death. So the way you described reincarnation.
So Jeremiah, did he die?
Yes.
So then if asking somebody, are you Jeremiah, that would be a perfect example of reincarnation, possibly. Would you agree? It's possible.
The question doesn't prove the answer. So.
I didn't say that, but isn't it possible that they're asking, is he Jeremiah reincarnated?
What I'm actually asking is, how is a question like that answered at the time? And is there anything in the Jewish scriptures that supports that the Pharisees believed in reincarnation at that time? Or is this a new concept?
So academically, they would say that this is a later concept.
Okay.
Yes, that's what they would say in the university. But let me ask you this. Are we going to play the university game, you and I?
I'm not playing.
We're not going to play the university
I just
game.
wanted to understand whether you could rationalize or justify or explain the rejection of Yeshua as the Messiah on the basis of some theory of reincarnation. But you acknowledge that the Pharisees were the ones that may have believed in that, but not at the time of Jesus. So therefore, that wasn't the
don't-
Well,
I don't
my
think he-
rabbis teach
I don't
that the
think he
Pharisees at
acknowledged-
the time of Jesus believed in
Yeah,
reincarnation.
yeah. I think that they're saying that that they did believe that at the time of Jesus.
Is there what's the evidence in the scriptures that Pharisees believed in reincarnation at the time of Jesus?
The one that he just gave, that the kid asked, the disciples asked, is he, the question.
Okay, is there any answer to that question in the scriptures that suggests that they actually...
And like the Hebrew Bible? Is that what you're asking me?
Sure.
Or in the Talmud?
The Hebrew Bible.
In the Hebrew
We can deal
Bible.
with
So
one at a time.
if we go where? To Job 33?
Yeah.
All right. Let me pull up there. Yes, please.
Right there, 23.
How about
All
verse
right.
25?
So I'll read it for you.
Yeah.
So behold, God does all these things twice, 3 times with a man,
What
to bring
verse?
back his soul from
Asher,
the pit,
what
that
verse
he
are we-
may be lighted
Asher,
with the light
Asher,
of
what,
life.
what verse so that we can follow? What verse?
Oh, this is Job 33, 29, and Job 33:30.
Sorry.
Can you go...
What was the first one, Job?
33.
No, they're both they're in Job 33. It's verses 29 and 30.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
So now let me ask you a question. So behold, God does all these things twice, 3 times with a man, to bring back his soul from the pit. So you got buried. Your soul's going to be brought back, correct?
Well, are you now suggesting...
I'm asking you.
Are you now suggesting that God is communicating with man here?
So let me ask you
one
this.
question at a time.
What would be your reading of this? So your soul goes down into the pit, you get buried, and you're going to come back how many times possibly?
So I would say, in response to this, if I may pick up the Aegis for a second, a wise man once told me, you have to read everything in context. So I have a rule.
Oh, well, now hold on.
This is your rule. I'm
If we're
going
going
back
to do
to.
the context game,
We are.
Will you
It's not-
please admit that the New Testament takes the Hebrew Bible out of context?
I don't think so. No, I will not.
Oh, here we
See,
go.
so then we go to, all I would do is what Asher does. If we go to Matthew, talking about
but
the
hold
birth
on,
of
with-
Jesus.
with your permission-
Isaiah 7 is out of context.
With your permission, let us address that after this question. So by all means, bring that one up. But the direct question right now is this right here in context? Now, you're the one, this is your quote, not mine, of, what's your rule, 20 and 20? I forget how many verses before and how many verses after. 20 and 20, right? So if you go 20 back and you say, all right, well, the question that we're asking is, he brings back his soul from the pit that he may be enlightened with the light of the line 2 to even 3 times. What does it mean? Well, yet if there's a man is chastened on his bed, in pain, in constant distress of his bones, so that he detests his bread, and his soul loathes his favorite food. His flesh wastes away from sight, and his hidden bones protrude. He draws near to the pit, and his life to the messengers of death. Yet if there is a mediator on his side, one mediator in 1,000, to tell a man what is right for him, to be gracious to him and say, spare him from going down to the pit, that is to say, he does not enter the pit, I have found his ransom. I will ransom him so he does not enter the pit. Then his flesh is refreshed like a child's. He returns to the days of his youth. He prays to God and finds favor. He sees God's face and shouts for joy. God restores the righteousness to that man, and he sings before men with these words, I have sinned and perverted what is right, yet I did not get what I deserved. He redeemed my soul from going down to the pit, and I will live to see the light. Behold, all these things God does to a man 2 or even 3 times. So this is the guy who's on the verge.
To bring back his soul from the pit.
No, he's on the verge. All these right here say he's on the verge of death.
So now I'm going to ask you something.
He does not.
So
He's brought back from the verge.
If I were to read this, I would say that is not the context of the passage. However, my religion does not read the Hebrew Bible necessarily in context, and neither does Christianity.
Okay, I want to disagree with that statement. I'm just putting myself out and say that the Christian claims to, and therefore must, try his or her best to read it in context, because we claim.
So I call baloney on this.
No, I'm saying we're claiming to. You can't call baloney on the claim. I'm making the claim. So unless you're saying that I'm not saying what I'm saying,
so
this is
out
the
of
claim.
Israel I've called my son. We know that the nation of Israel came out of Egypt, yet the New Testament applies that to Jesus.
Yes.
That is not the context of the passage.
Are you saying
so?
It
is completely taken this out of context.
Are you saying that it is the case that nowhere in prophetic literature in the Hebrew Bible are there dual meanings to verses?
In rabbinic Judaism or contextually? I've never seen contextually where that happens. Do you know?
Rabbinic Judaism?
No. He's saying if you take rabbinic Judaism out, just biblically, if you were to go to, the scholars of the Bible, do you know where they would talk about, non-sectarian scholars, where they would say that there's that? That
messianic prophecy has to be dedicated. Univocal prophecy.
Dual meaning.
Yes, right. The dual meaning is not possible.
Well, no. He's just asking: are there non-sectarian scholars who actually proffer that when they write on Isaiah or wherever?
No, to my knowledge, everybody who studies biblical literature acknowledges that dual prophecies are a thing.
I'd like to know who.
So I've got 4 academic.
As far as I know, it's without exception. I don't know of anybody who's an exception to that rule.
Anybody who's accepted what?
He says that all scholars acknowledge dual meaning in prophecy.
So I've got 4 academic study Bibles sitting right there. So I have never seen this in any of them. All 4 of those are the standard that's used at universities across this planet. Non-sectarian. I've never seen them say any of those types of statements for Psalm 22, Isaiah 53, etc., etc. Not once. If you can show me, I would love to see it.
Yeah, I think we're talking about 2 different things. I think we're talking about whether academics writ large, and I'll say, if it's not all, and it's all to my knowledge, but let's say that I'm wrong, and it's just a vast majority, or let's say I'm only a little wrong, and it's a vast majority, that the vast majority acknowledge that in the Hebrew scriptures, prophecy can be bivalent. It can have an immediate meaning and it can have a distant meaning. Are you saying that is not widely accepted?
I've never seen that.
Okay, then I could be wrong, but I'll go back and look at it and see. But that's the general understanding that we're operating under, at least.
Yeah, so that's why my thing on this, since in Rabbinic Judaism we have a Pardes system, Peshat, Remesh, Drash, and Sod. And these are not necessarily in context. So we believe that the text here is a multivalent text, just like you guys do in Christianity.
Yeah, you can't be, I must not be asking the question right. Rashi, Vilna Gaon, all these guys talk about, hey, here are the 2, here's the prince and the priest, and both of them receive crowns, and that both of these are happening to Yehoshua the priest at the time, and that Yehoshua the priest is a figure of the Messiah to come.
But he answered that for Rabbinic Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism believes these texts are multivalent. However, the reason he's willing to say that Rabbinic Judaism takes these texts out of context is if you went to the academics, the non-sectarian academics, people are not, pushing a Christian agenda or a Jewish agenda.
Okay.
So if you look at them, they would disagree with how our religion reads those texts and say, we're taking it out of context.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So I'll leave that off for a second and say at least this. You and I agree that of the 3, Rabbinic Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, Christianity, and secular academics, there's only one you can bank on to not be right. and that's these guys, right? It's either one of us who's right, these guys can't be right.
I don't believe that, but that's okay.
Okay, you think that it's possible that they're right, that it's likely that they're right and that you're wrong.
Oh, it's possible that they have things that are right.
Possible.
Right, right, but likely. How about let's say probable?
Many elements at least.
Okay, but
Yeah.
probably speaking, your interpretation is the best one.
I mean, I believe in Orthodox Rabbinic Judaism, and my rabbis teach that we do not interpret the Hebrew Bible in context.
Okay, and I believe in Christianity, and so neither one of us believe in their interpretation, so
Okay.
for now, we can leave that one off, because the debate's between these two
Which is why I
positions.
already admitted, this passage right here, we can pull it out of context like we do in Midrash and other things.
Yes.
And this is a normal thing for us to do. Just like in Christian literature, they pull things out of context and they apply it to Jesus.
Then why do you criticize the Christian for pulling it out of context?
No,
You do it yourself.
you guys are criticizing me. You asked me about, hey, is this the context of this passage? I said it is not the context of this passage.
Right.
But that's one of the places where we would go to get the concept of reincarnation.
Sure, but context of does this particular verse refer to reincarnation versus does this particular verse refer to death is dependent on the context. So you're not making the point. You're making the point that the reason that this verse is important is it because it refers to somebody going down into death and coming back out of death 2 to 3 times. I'm saying that the concept, so that's a non-contextual, that's actually a literal use, that you turn around and say, I'm going to apply that elsewhere to my philosophy. In this case, what we're saying is the very context says that this is not about death. This is about
I understand
hitting the
that.
brink.
He gets that. I guess really what the issue always is, I've read a lot of anti-Mormon literature.
Yeah, yeah.
And what I find typically is when...
Is it anti-Mormon?
Mormon, yeah.
What? I've read a lot of anti-Mormon literature.
Mormon, okay.
Yeah, anti-Mormon.
It's 1021.
Yeah, thank you.
And-
After this,
I'll make it quick. And what I find is individuals, typically Protestant Christians, when they write about Mormonism and are critical, they go, hi, Mr. Mormon, here's what we'd like to do. Set aside your Latter-day Saint literature. We're just going to read the Christian Bible, something that we share, quote unquote, in context. And of course, when you go to the New Testament and you read certain passages that Mormons might understand differently, they go, see, in context, you're wrong. But I would say the same is true for Rabbinic Judaism and Christianity. If you read Isaiah 7 in context, it does not refer to a Messiah being born 700 years later. In context, it refers to something at that time.
yes, right.
Same thing with Rabbinic Judaism. There could be examples that could be brought from there. And so it seems like people, when they want to beat somebody over the head, they use the context argument, when their own religion, if you applied that same standard, they would fail also.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. The point I was making is I'm not making that kind of contextual extraction. I'm saying consistency within the verse itself, in the context in which it's meant, is that what it's talking about is someone nearly dying, not someone actually dying. So if you're going to point to it as this is about someone actually dying and coming back, then you would hope, then if I were in your position, I would hope that it was saying that versus saying he got to the brink of death and got brought back. But fine, no sweat. We're out of time. Thank you for catching us. We will continue with this group if they're willing next time. What I will do next time is then lay out what I consider to be my very short 5 minutes. This is why Christianity gets Messiah right. Because I think, and this will be the last thing to say, here's my number one question for you to answer next time. Why is Yeshua in Gehenna if this is exactly what Yeshua came to say? Like, that is straight out of the New Testament for the Christian.
Supposedly.
Repent, for the kingdom of heaven in his hand. Here's love your neighbor, etc. Fear God and keep his commandments. These are all Christian things. Okay. Till next time. Thank you, gents. Appreciate it. Thank you all for staying over with us. Yeah, thank you guys.